Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome one and all to the Defiant Takes Football Show. I'm Max Dean. You can find me on Twitter at @TheMaxDean. And I'm back live for our first weekly recap in the NFL season with Kyron Samuels. Kyron's at Kyron Samuels on Twitter. He is our offensive line expert and our social media director here at Defiant Takes Football. And man, I'm still shell-shocked after that game. Oh, that was brutal.
Yeah.
First, man, how are you? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Glad to be back. It's been a long off season, and just glad to be back talking about football, man. There's nothing better. So we got an eventful weekend, especially for, I would say, the evening slate of yesterday, and then tonight was rather eventful, man. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, me too. Well, excited is I was a lot more excited like 3 hours ago. But yeah, no, it was an interesting weekend. There's a lot to take away from this. A lot of they are who we thought they were. Some surprises, and then of course, the realization that there's a lot of overreaction for week one because for the most part, this stuff all changes, right? By the end of the season, a lot of the takes that we had after week one are dead and gone. But there are things that we can take legitimate insight from, I do think. So we're going to go through 5 games right now, both of the primetime games from Sunday and Monday. We also have 3 other games selected for the rest of the show, and then we'll just quickly touch on the remaining games with a quick hot take and give ourselves a little lightning round. But first, we have to talk about what we just witnessed. The New York Jets beat the Buffalo Bills in MetLife Stadium just a few short minutes ago.
In the funniest way possible.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start because, I am a Jets fan, right? So there are a lot of expectations going into this season. I'm a moderate fan for sure. I look at things pretty big picture for the most part. So, I was not going crazy. I know a lot of things can happen over the course of the season, but even I did not expect to have Aaron Rodgers go down for the season in 4 plays. 1 pass attempt.
It's just like
2 dropbacks, 1 pass attempt.
It's Jets luck, man. Like, I think the Jets, the Browns, and the Bears are probably, and you maybe can, depending on how the Dolphins season shakes out, those are like the cursed franchises in the NFL right now. Everything that can go wrong for those franchises seems to go wrong. It's uncanny.
Yeah. I mean, teams that haven't really won in decades and decades and decades. And, I mean, you could probably include the Raiders there too. I don't think I heard you mention them. But yeah, the Browns who haven't won a Super Bowl, I don't think the Dolphins haven't won one since the 70s. Jets haven't won one since the 60s. And maybe the Vikings too. But at least they've had more sustained success. It's just, it's heartache, man. It is. But, so moving on from that, we'll come back and we'll talk about the fallout from this Rodgers injury later. But for the game itself, what actually happened? Well, the Jets were getting their sea legs with the offensive line, which did play better as the game went on. But, we didn't have Dwayne Brown in there for the entirety of the preseason. He was hurt, so he was getting kind of his legs underneath him, and hopefully he continues to get better over the course of the season. And that was a problem early. As soon as Rodgers goes out, Wilson comes in, and you just don't know what to expect. I guess that's a great place to start because the reality is, even though he did have the interception and he looked a little bit skittish, I'll be honest, I watched every game of his last year. This was a better performance. He didn't have the errant passes. He wasn't missing all the throws. His completion percentage wasn't bad. And the reality is that, I mean, you have to at least be optimistic that he'll be better than last year. That being said, it's still a major, major step down. So before we jump to, the other color, the other New York team, What was your takeaway for the Jets offense after Rodgers went down?
It's hard to really get a read on it because I don't know how much of the offense that they actually planned for Zach Wilson. I mean, as an NFL coach, as an NFL coordinator, your job is to have contingency plans. So I'm sure there was 5 to 10 plays maybe that they sat in those meeting rooms and went over and said, hey, if something happens, unfortunately, these are going to be the plays that we run. But I can guarantee you 99% of the reps that they practiced and they went over was all for Aaron Rodgers, what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. And I think that it did put Nathaniel Hackett and the offense in a little bit of a bind. And I think it put the offensive line at a major disadvantage. They didn't have a really good night tonight. But I'd say after the first interception, because that was bad, I would say his first 5 or 6 snaps were pretty bad, and it looked like it was just going to get ugly there quick. But the running game did a very good job of getting explosives. You know, they did a good job of getting him screen passes. I believe almost half of his yardage come from screen passes or screen passes behind the line of scrimmage or right after the line of scrimmage, which is what you need to do with Zach Wilson. You don't need him forcing the ball, trying to read coverages and make hole shots. I thought he made one special throw. I believe it was on a third down. It was a third and long, I believe. I can't remember the exact down and distance, but he made a good throw, and I forgot who it was that caught it, but they came back to the ball, caught it. It was a little bit low, but it was a very precise throw. I believe he needed to throw it low to keep it away from everybody, and it was a big throw. But other than that, I thought he did what he did great was operational. He got the snap clean. He didn't make any dumb decisions after the interception. He made some plays with his feet and kept a couple drives going with his feet. And he just didn't make any turnover-worthy plays, and that was all you needed because the defense was playing so well. Well, and we'll talk about the defense in a second because they got bailed out by some terrible, terrible, terrible decisions. I think they played very well up front. I mean, they're obviously going to get after the passer. They have one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I thought DJ Reed had an incredible game. I thought he played very well. But as a whole, I thought the defense didn't break, but I think that the Bills' offense left a lot to be desired. They left a lot of points on the field. So, but which is to be expected. The Bills are one of the best teams on both sides of the football. I mean, when you have 2 good teams, this is what you're going to get. But I thought the offense for the Jets did just enough. Definitely got put in some advantageous positions, got a couple extra possessions that they shouldn't have had. But that's NFL football, and you have to make the most of those opportunities. And I truly thought they did that. And shout out to Brees. He had a great game. Shout out to Gary Wilson, the incredible catch. He had 5 targets, and he had 5 catches. So maybe you should target the guy a little bit more. I understand the quarterback situation. You were probably not expecting to have Zach Wilson in there. But get creative. Get him the ball quick game. Get him the ball on some comeback routes, some safer throws to the outside of the field. That's not going to force him to, first of all, think too much, Zach Wilson that is. And second of all, it's a higher percentage throw. Get him some stuff closer to the boundaries. If you're on either side of the field, boom, get him some boundary throws that take all the reads away from him. And he has that one read or go. So those are just things that can maybe in the future help. But I thought they played well enough to win with what they were presented with. And that's all you can ask for in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they were hesitant to call passes down the field because they weren't sure how the offensive line was holding up. I don't think they really wanted to test that out. And, you know, maybe we'll see a little bit more of that with time. But the reality is that they did paint themselves into a corner with all the passes around the line of scrimmage and, you know, all the running plays. It doesn't give you a lot of threat to the opposing defense to account for, so they can kind of hone in on what you're doing. And I just don't know how sustainable that is. But on the bright side, Breece Hall did look fantastic, and he needs to get in game shape because he's missed the preseason for the most part. He hasn't really, you know, had the training camp hits. He hasn't gotten into football shape yet. And you could see that, you know, he is super explosive, but he got gassed on his 85-yard run. I mean, he should have had a touchdown there, and he didn't because he got tired, which, you know, it is what it is. In a few games, that'll come back. But a lot of positives from the surrounding cast. But ultimately, this is really just the same team as it was last year now, right? You sub in Alan Lazard for Corey Davis, who were retired or pseudo-retired.
You know what? I'm actually going to give him a little bit of bail. I think that they're going to be better up front. I was very encouraged from what I saw from Mekhi Becton tonight. I was very encouraged from what I saw from Elijah Vera Tucker. It wasn't his best game, but he's still getting back into the swing of it. So when you take into consideration the strides that they can possibly make up front, I think that it could be a little bit better than it was last year. And like you said, if Zach Wilson is even 5 or 10% better than he was last year, that is a exponential jump, and that could probably take you from a 7-win team to a 10-win team. So even going forward, I'm not very high on Zach Wilson. I'm not going to sugarcoat it or act like I am. But like I said, if he makes even a small jump, cuts back on the turnovers, and increases, like, just not even scoring a ton more points, but just keeping the ball longer, keeping your defense off the field, burning more clock, shortening games, they can make a huge jump because the defense and the special teams, which proved to be paramount, were that good, and they played that consistent, and I think they'll continue to play that consistent.
Yeah, I think you can have a lot of faith in them. So looking at the other side of the ball now, um, well, let's talk about the Jets defense. So we had a few guys really stand out. We had Quincy Williams had a phenomenal game. He had, I don't know how many tackles, I should look it up, but he had a ton of tackles, clutch open field tackles, big time plays. You had Quinnen Williams, who had a phenomenal game. You had Jermaine Johnson, who stepped up and had a phenomenal game. You pointed out DJ Reed had a really nice game. And then Jordan Whitehead, who, capitalized. The dude capitalized on the opportunities that were presented to him, and he came away with 3 interceptions, and they, without a doubt, changed the game for the Jets. Without those defensive turnovers, special plays, they never would have won. But as you pointed out, as well as the Jets played, there were some major mistakes that the Bills sort of they made themselves. So why don't you talk about those?
Well, I've seen way too many people on the timeline critiquing the run game and critiquing Ken Dorsey. So, everybody on Twitter and Instagram or whatever has an opinion. And a lot of them are fair. Most of them just knee-jerk emotional reactions. But far too many people are criticizing Ken Dorsey in the running game. The running game was fine. Do you know who you're playing? Like, you're playing one of the best front sevens in all of football. You're also playing one of the best tackling secondaries in all of football. These guys make tackles in space very well. You're not going to get a ton of explosive runs against these guys. What you need to do is use the run game to stay ahead of the chains, get you in second and third and short, and convert on third and fourth and short. That's what the run game is for against teams like this. And they did more than that. I believe they almost had 97. Well, they had 97 yards total rushing, and you have to subtract the sack stats away from that. So I thought they did well enough to win that game. They were in control of that game for 3.5 quarters. It came down to Josh Allen forcing footballs that he should not. It's as simple as that. We're going into I believe this is year 6 for Josh Allen. He has been in the NFL since 2018. These are rookie mistakes that he's making over and over and over again. Forcing the ball in a double coverage, not reading the flat hole player, trying to force the ball into the boundary. It's just stuff that we've seen time and time again from Josh Allen. People are blaming Ken Dorsey, but your all-pro MVP level quarterback, a guy that people have debated and argued till they're blue in the face, that is better than Patrick Mahomes, better than Joe Burrow, better than Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, we could go down the list, better than all those guys, continues to make these same mistakes. It's kind of gotten away from us in the past narrative-wise, because despite all that, they found a way to win ball games, as they had a chance to win the ball game again tonight. They found a way to win ball games more times than not. But this is a repeated behavior. It's a pattern, and it's put them into trouble where the game should not have been close. If Josh Allen plays turnover-free, smart football, and just keeps them from giving the ball to the Jets for an extra possession or two, or in plus territory, or just keep the ball on your side, that is a 16-6 ball game. They get out of there with the W, and they probably should have scored more points than that. It's all on Josh Allen. I hate to say that. Like, football never comes down to just one player, but he made multiple blunders, 3 interceptions, a butt fumble. Like, that's not as bad as the Jets' Mark Sanchez butt fumble. But when you take into account the fact that Aaron Rodgers goes down on the 4th play of the game, the Bills hype. The Bills are always talked about as an AFC Championship Super Bowl caliber team, which they probably are, which is why it's even more disappointing that he continues to go through these same mistakes and underachieve. That's what makes it like just a little bit harder to accept and to deal with. He's gotten a pass for so long for these same mistakes, and now it's finally coming to light, and we have to address it. He has 39 turnovers in his last 19 games. He has 81 turnovers since he's coming to the NFL. That is the most in the NFL since 2018, more than any other quarterback. So when we look at these, and then somebody just sent me a stat. I had a tweet that kind of like popped off and went viral a little bit, and people were, hounding me in my mentions about it. So I'm going to go pull that up real quick, and I need to talk about it because I think it says everything. All right, so this is another one. It's talking about other quarterbacks with turnover rate. because everybody likes to give him Bell, and everybody likes to say, "Oh, he could have did this, he could have did that." He still wins ball games. I don't think that's fair because we see other quarterbacks all the time. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow all have a higher touchdown to interception ratio by over a point. So he's almost 2-1 right now. 2 interceptions or 2 fumbles. He has 10 fumbles as well over the last 2 years. So he's turning the ball over every time he scores a touchdown. The other guys it's 2 to almost a half a point. It's like when we talk about over the course of a season, it's an 8 turnover difference. That's how important it is. And I believe that is what's costing the Bills ball games now. I like Josh Allen. I put him second in my quarterback list because he's still that freaky talented. He's still, I mean, if you look at his stat line outside of the turnover plays, it was one of the best games he probably ever played. He started off the game 14 for 17, like carving up the defense. I mean, Diggs had 60-something yards at halftime. Diggs finishes with 10 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Probably should have had another one. So Diggs had one of the better games of his career considering the talent on the opposite end. It's just frustrating when you see these things happen over and over again, and then it gets excused for so long, and now you find the cost of them ball games, and people are like, maybe we should look at this. The writing's been on the wall for a long time. There's been so many other people get blamed. They got him another weapon with Dalton Kincaid, who showed up tonight and had some big catches for him. When is it going to be like, hey, this guy has to get better? That's my biggest question.
Yeah, well, it's a fair question. I think the problem is, and the reason is that a lot of the guys who have the touchdown to interception ratio that he does, for the most part, they are not making the special plays that he does, right? And so that's gotten him a lot of, I don't know, what's the word? It's given him a major buffer for the mistakes. People don't want to come down too hard on him. And I think people still remember the game that he played against the Chiefs. And it was just incredible because he was making all those special plays and he wasn't turning the ball over. He was making the right decisions. And so, moments like that linger in people's mind when they're ranking quarterbacks and whatnot. But the reality is that he knows what to do. It's not that he doesn't. He just gets locked in and he just.
You know what? That's the question I have. I'm not 100% convinced of that. I'm not sure he knows what he's looking at. I truly do not. I don't know because I don't think he continues to make the same mistakes because I can't remember who it was. One of the athletic guys, and I have, a lot of one of my good friends, Deshaun Reed, works there. I have a lot of respect for those guys. But he said, "Oh, if I had Josh Allen's arm talent, I would try to force it in there as much as possible." Kind of like giving him a pass. It was right after one of his interceptions. And I'm like, I don't think it's him knowing what he has to do and just believing in his ability. They're too frequent for that. I believe he has a problem reading, especially, and it's not even like anything complex, crazy. There's a problem reading the too high shell with the honey hole player that's talented enough to get there. Sometimes I'll give him the pass because, like you said, he might just believe in his ability and just force the ball in there a little bit, and it gets through on most people. You're playing the New York Jets. You know what kind of secondary and pass rush you're playing against. You play him twice a year. It's not a surprise. I just don't believe he truly has evolved, and it's crazy to say that when you look at his stats and his numbers and what he's done. But that's the difference between winning ball games in the snow against the Bengals when you need to get back to the AFC Championship game and try to get revenge against the Chiefs, which you lost to the year before. That's the difference in getting to those ball games. Or maybe that's the difference between you getting a better seed to where you don't have to play the Bengals or the Chiefs until the AFC Championship game at home. Those are the little differences that I think have been holding them back. And I'm not sure it's just because of his ability and not a deficient processing ability.
Yeah, it's man, I don't know if I can really defend it because the two in particular where he was just chucking it down the field into too high coverage, like I don't really have an excuse for that. Because I can't justify it. Like you gotta know that the safety is there. Like you have to. You can't just, your guy is not gonna outrun a safety that's just waiting. You know what I mean? So I don't really know what that was all about. And then after that, I think that it just kind of snowballed on him. And I don't know. I think there is something true also in the idea that it's psychological for sure, but like certain teams, once you don't perform well against them, you psych yourself out when you go back. Because I think the Jets have had the best performances against Josh Allen, or rather, he's had the worst performances against them. And I think that kind of happened again today. And I think that there's probably a bit of a psych out factor there too. And I also think that's true with like Zach Wilson and the Patriots, right? He plays wildly worse against them even than anybody else. And it's not saying a lot because he's been bad, but I think there is that too. So let's give him a couple of weeks to bounce back, and we can revisit the conversation. But I do think it's one worth having because it wasn't a good day. They improved the offensive line. They improved the skill group around him. And, it didn't work out. I mean, I think we buried the lead a little bit. Obviously, the Jets win it in overtime um, off of a punt return. And
Special teams, baby. They played great special teams.
they
Great
did
special teams. Flipped the
very
field a
good.
couple times with the punt game. Made their kicks when they needed to make their kicks. I mean, talk about the end of the game. The Bills, they were lucky to get into overtime with the it bounces off the upright and it sneaks in. I know I
Oh
have a
my
good
God.
friend that's a Jets
Could
fan, and
not
he was like,
believe it.
he said he's gonna jump. He's like, I can't do this anymore. He's like, I can't do this as a Jets fan. So, um, but listen, at least the people got their money's worth. If you were in that stadium tonight, that's gonna be one of the most memorable experiences of your life. Getting to experience that game, the highs and the lows of Aaron Rodgers going down, and everybody feeling doomed. Then you getting dominated for 3 quarters and 3.5 quarters really, and then next thing you know, you look up and you're up 16-13 with the chance to win the ball game, and then the field goal happens, and then overtime. It's just such an emotional roller coaster that I couldn't even imagine being a fan of either of those teams.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I it was hard enough when Garrett Wilson caught that ball. I'm watching this game alone, right? Like I've got my setup where I watch all my games, and I verbally just yelled, "Oh my God!" Like I almost never verbally outburst watching football because it's just me alone and I'm just so like focused. I could not believe that he caught that ball. That was
Incredible catch.
one of the
About as
best of the
bad of a
year.
fade ball as you could throw, which is hilarious. It's like the most important ball he threw all night was probably one of the worst. But I mean, that's what happens when you just give your playmakers a chance to make a play for you, and it worked out for him. Happy for him too
Oh,
because he went through hell, and I thought he did a very good job this offseason of. I watched a couple of his media interviews. I thought he did a much better job in front of the press, and I didn't think that was going to translate to any on-field success. But I just thought it showed a little bit of maturity in him.
mhm.
So you can see a little bit of that. I saw a little bit of that. He just handling himself better, even on the hard knocks. You didn't get too much of him, but when you did see him, he seemed like he was handling it very well. And Rodgers was kind of taking him under his wing a little bit. And he didn't play great by any means. Like I'm not sold on him at all, but I do think he's made strides in that capacity, and I think that's to be commended. And he handled himself very well tonight.
Yeah, the Jets didn't trust him. They didn't give him a lot of opportunities to either succeed or fail, but he was better than he's been because he wasn't missing open throws. At least not, he may have missed them by not recognizing them, but he didn't miss any throws with errant passes that just went to the feet of his receivers. He made a couple of nice plays. The one you talked about, I think, was to Alan Lazard. He had a really nice throw on a slant to Wilson too, in tight coverage, and then he had the one where he was scrambling left and his foot was stepped on, and as he's falling, he flips the ball out. So he made a few decent plays. For the most part, he wasn't asked to do too much, and ultimately the Jets did come away with the win. And I don't know. I when I think about the Jets going up against the Cowboys defense next week, I don't even
Yeah, I
know.
mean,
I don't
it's
even
going to
know.
be tough, but you have to be uh, impressed with what you saw from the run game and the offensive line. I do think they're going to get a lot better, man. And you know what? I saw a lot of people giving the offensive line hell for that. That play is 100% on Aaron Rodgers. Get the ball out.
I
It's
know.
three step.
I
It's
know.
quick game. Your offensive line is cutting. I can guarantee you. This is one thing that I know. I had this conversation with a couple of my friends, my buddies that played offensive line as well. Maybe back in the day, and I don't care if it's Dwayne Brown, 5-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All Pro, all that good stuff. Maybe back in the day he could get away with just freestyling and cut blocking when he wants to. But I guarantee you, Aaron Rodgers and those guys in that room have had a conversation about cut blocks because this is a common debate. A lot of quarterbacks don't like it. A lot of offense coaches don't like it. A lot of offensive line coaches love it because, in theory, it gets guys on the ground and gives you enough time to get that third step in the ground to get the ball out. It's supposed to protect you, but you have to get the ball out on that third step if you're going to be cutting. And I guarantee you that was a conversation that was had. But too many people blaming Dwayne Brown for that one. You have to get that ball out.
I agree because, and this is a whole other thing. The Bills were fully prepared for quick game and running the ball from the Jets. And, the Jets were still able to have some success with Breece Hall, who's just ridiculously explosive. But they were ready for that. And that is why Rodgers held the ball. He wanted to come out and start making plays right off the bat. He didn't want to throw the ball away twice in a row. But he has to. If they're not open, you need to throw the ball away and adjust. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. But all right, let's move on to the other primetime game of the weekend. The Dallas Cowboys go in and absolutely throttle the New York Giants. And
well, sorry to cut you here. Schefter just updated, and it's official. He's out for the year. So he just officially ruptured Achilles. You figured it was coming, but he just officially said it, which it sucks. But you know what? It gives you guys time to prepare. Somebody just said something. I believe it was Ted Wynn who said, "Would the Jets send a first to the Raiders for Jimmy Garoppolo at this point, or would you be that desperate?
No.
Why not? Hey, he elevates the floor of the. Did you see that defense in the second half though, man? He elevates you guys floor into a playoff team at minimum. And once you get that defense into the playoffs, it's, in my opinion, you've invested too much into the team as it is right now to throw this year away. And I don't think Zach Wilson's good enough to get to the playoffs, let alone win playoff games. We know at minimum Jimmy can get you there. And once you get that defense to the playoffs, it might be worth it.
I don't know. We'll have a conversation off air where
Right.
you can try and sell me on that because I'm not buying it right now. I hear you, but we're certainly not until I see Zach Wilson with a week to prepare as a starter. Then we'll talk. How about that? Actually, maybe 2 weeks because it's the Cowboys next.
Hey, I'm just saying, we saw him for 2 years. We seen him as a starter. We know what he is.
All right.
But I agree. I got you.
All right. So, Dallas Cowboys crushed the Giants. Giants, they had one good drive. They had one good drive that ended up with a blocked field goal for a touchdown return. And then basically it was a mudslide from there. And that was not intended to be a pun because it was very wet, but it was just all downhill. Everything that could have gone wrong for them went wrong. They couldn't get any offense going. Their offensive line was getting absolutely pummeled by, even the fifth and sixth rusher for the Cowboys. The Cowboys offensively, they didn't have a monster game, but they were given a lot of opportunities and they were effective. They were effective enough. And when you are gift wrapped a game like that, then, you just have to execute relatively modestly and you'll walk away with a sizable victory, 40-0. Honestly, it was a pretty boring game by the end of it, but it is what it is. They made a statement on primetime.
Yeah, that is the most accurate description of the game. It was a boring game, but I will say this for both teams. But for the Cowboys, I thought it was hilarious. Dak Prescott went 13 for 24, 143 yards, no touchdowns, and half of that came in late in the third quarter when they were stat padding, just leaving them in. It was already 33-0. Tony Pollard ran for 53 yards. Half of that came on one run late in the third quarter. They essentially did nothing on offense and were up 23-0 in that ball game. I've never seen anything quite like it. I don't think I've ever seen unbalanced production like that. So it was very interesting to see the Cowboys. I'll say the most impressive thing, the offensive line looks healthy again. Tyron Smith looked like Tyron Smith last night. And as long as you have that, he is going to be a huge factor for them because if he can get back to that all-pro, Pro Bowl level that he's accustomed to playing at and not having to deal with injuries, I think it elevates the offensive line to top 2 or 3 in the NFL. So that's my biggest takeaway on either side of the ball for the Dallas Cowboys. The offensive line looks healthy. Tyler Smith looks good. The entire group just looks healthy and refreshed. We'll see how long it lasts. It's NFL. Injuries happen. You get wore down. You get beat up. But you have to be very encouraged about that. And for the Giants, I wouldn't panic at all. They look like the same exact team that they were last year. Now, as a Giants fan, you may not want to hear that for better or for worse, but it's just how the game goes sometimes, man. There's 4 or 5 bounces that just went the Cowboys' way so early in that game. I mean, one of the interceptions that Daniel Jones threw was terrible. The other one just bounces directly off of Saquon. He gets blindsided. He doesn't see the DB coming. Boom. Trayvon Diggs. He doesn't see Trayvon Diggs coming. Pops him in the rib. Ball comes out. Caught. Return for a touchdown. Bad luck. Cowboys fumble and getting ready to go into the end zone while it's still a 7-point game. It goes right to the offensive lineman's lap. Those little details, like those little bounces, can change the momentum of the game. And the Giants are not built like a team to come back. Once you're down 16-0, 23-0, that offense is not built to go get you points in bunches. And the defense is very good. I still believe it's a good defense. We saw what they did to the Cowboys offense. The Cowboys did not have a productive night offensively. So I think if you just try to look at it for what it is, and as a whole, the Giants are going to be okay. The Cowboys defense is really good. The offensive line is really good. Dak and the receivers have to get a little bit more continuity, but I wouldn't take too much from that game. I don't think we learned a lot about either team.
Well, I will say this. I agree with you on just about everything that you said about the Giants, but their offensive line needs to get better. There's really no two ways about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Andrew Thomas didn't have the best game. He has some credibility at this point. You know, I would expect him to come back from that. John Michael Schmitz, he struggled. He's a rookie. And anytime you put a rookie offensive lineman out there, especially, you know, early in the season, prime time, bad conditions, there's a lot that can go wrong there. I think he had some bad snaps. He had some mistakes for sure, just in terms of just handing off stunts and twists and everything. But I think the biggest one was Evan Neal. Evan Neal, at some point, I feel like there was a point in that game where he mentally kind of stepped away, because it went from just getting beaten as much as like you would on a bad night to just getting beaten on every rep. Like at some point he packed it in, and they've got to get with him and help him mentally get back confidence, you know, because
the whole team packed it in after that third quarter. After halfway through the second, well, I'll say about halfway through the third quarter, I was shocked to see Daniel Jones come back on the field. I don't know if they were trying to prove a point or if he's trying to build toughness into his team or whatever it is, but it didn't work because the guys just collectively, it got worse from that point. I mean, like you said, Andrew Thomas, all-pro guy, he was getting embarrassed. Glowinski had a worse game than anybody. The right guard, he had a worse game than anybody. Yeah, Evan Neal, terrible game. He started off fairly well first half, couple stunts. Early in the game, they were getting beat on stunts. So they were doing a good job of creating separation and getting, easy rush lanes and people getting on half of shoulders. And they really dominated the game like that. Third quarter, they were just getting straight up beat on speed rush. They were just running through the Giants offensive line. And like you said, I do believe a point in that third quarter where they just flipped off the switch mentally and they just were not there. And I was shocked because they just paid Daniel Jones he's getting how much a year now to play quarterback for you? I don't even $40 million or something like that. They had him in there getting pummeled the entire night trying to prove a point. Whatever that point is, I don't know, but it could have gotten there 120 million, 140 million, however much he got investment put out for the season. So, but like I said, I wouldn't put too much stock into the game. It's the NFL, man. We've seen worse teams turn it around the next week, but you're right. The offensive line does have to prove it better. Lucky for them, they're not going to play the Cowboys every week, so they'll be able to work out the kinks a little bit.
That's true, and I also think on the other side of the ball, offensively, you have to point out that the weather affected that as well, right? So, I think that it made it hard to throw the ball down the field. Pretty much every East Coast game was affected by the weather yesterday, but the night game more so than the others. It seemed like it really ramped up as the night went on as well. So there's a lot of reasons, and this is probably one of those where we're going to have people massively reacting to this. The Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. The Giants are getting a top 5 pick or whatever. Probably neither of those are the most likely outcome. But all right. So do you have any other thoughts on this? Are there any other players who you wanted to highlight from this game?
No, I mean, other than Trayvon Diggs being great at football and people keep finding holes to pick it up, no, he was exceptional.
Yeah,
so, but I think that's just
great.
I think he's just done a good job. I'm drawing Al Harris is his cornerback coach. The addition of Al Harris last year has tamed his game a lot. He's always been a high caliber athlete, high caliber playmaker, and you saw the year he had the 10 interceptions, and I believe he gave up like the third most yards or something, which I didn't really care too much about. He only gave up 2 touchdowns that year, but you saw the refinement in his game last year. Didn't have as many picks, but had, I believe it was like 16 pass breakups, something crazy like that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still making plays on the ball. He was still getting you those turnover plays, but he wasn't getting beat nearly as much on those explosives. He wasn't nearly as reactionary. He was playing off of feel and instinct, but also discipline. And I think that's translated again already. We've seen it this year. A lot of times he was just coming off of guys, like the play where he forced a turnover, it's coming off his man to go clean that one up. He's just playing with so much more discipline. And I think that's coupled with his athletic ability and his natural instinct. And you're seeing it shine. So a big shout out to him because I thought he faced a lot of unfair criticism. We haven't seen many double-digit interception seasons. And all people were talking about was a couple plays he got beat on that added up over the course of the season instead of the bevy of plays. It was like 3-1 the amount of times he got beat or pass breakup, forced fumble, interception, one of those type plays. And it won them a lot of ball games. So big shout out to Trayvon Diggs.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was a really good game for Trayvon for sure. All right. So we are going to turn over to the AFC North, where the Browns hosted the Bengals and beat them up pretty badly. So this game is also probably a game where we're going to overreact, or at least, the average fan or the average media pundit will overreact. Try to avoid that too much here. First and foremost, Burrow couldn't throw accurately at all in this game. And I think while for the most part, the smaller hands storyline has been basically negligible up to this point, because even in the cold doesn't really seem to matter because he just has grip strength and hasn't been an issue. He's played great in cold weather games. He plays in Cincinnati. He's played in Pittsburgh. He plays in Baltimore. He plays wherever. Doesn't matter. But this rain seemed to make the ball particularly slippery. And we even saw issues with Deshaun Watson and some of the other players who were playing just, over the course of the Browns running backs, I noticed all took their gloves off to grip the ball better as well. But it did seem very clear that Burrow could essentially just not throw the ball with any accuracy at all whatsoever. So when you include that, then it takes a lot out of their game, because even though it seems like it's all the receivers, Higgins and Chase just going up to make plays when they're jumping around down the field, the ball has to be in a very specific place for them to be able to go up and do that. And that just wasn't happening. I mean, balls were being dirted, balls were being overthrown, they were going out of bounds. It was just bad. So while I normally don't really I don't believe that that's a storyline that should matter, I think in this case it was abundantly clear that it did.
I just think they couldn't get open and they couldn't block. That was more important than his hands. I think it's fair. I mean, I think the weather played a factor in a bunch of games this weekend, so I'll give him a little bit of a pass on that as well. Like I said, I think, like you said, I think it's negligible. Like maybe we could talk about it just as a talking point, maybe. But they just couldn't get open, man. I watched it back this morning. Those guys weren't getting open, and the difference is, and I think this is a big point of contention. I don't know about these separation stats. I don't have next gen pulled up next to me, but just watching it, it doesn't seem like they create a ton of separation anyway. It's not their game. They're 50-50 jump ball winners. They're athletic freaks that you throw the ball, you give them, a little bit crossers, you get them some quick slants, you get them some deep balls down the field, and you let their athleticism shine. They don't have a ton of guys that just go out there and beat you off the line and create a ton of separation anyway. It's just they're normally used to making these plays. That's how their offense is anyway. But when you can't block, which shout out to Orlando Brown Jr. He had a hell of a game considering who he was going against and the conditions. He played very well yesterday, but the rest of the offensive line did not play great. Again, it could have something to do with conditions, could have something to do with the Browns being revamped on a defensive line and having a legitimate Pro Bowler opposite Myles Garrett and some depth on the inside. I think that helped out a ton. But Denzel Ward had a hell of a game, monster game. Did a great job covering those guys. I just think that when you look at it overall, I don't think there's a ton to take away from this game either. Like I said that about the Giants and the Cowboys, and I'm going to say the same here. I think the Browns are much improved on the defensive side of the ball, specifically on the defensive line. I thought the offensive line played very well. Deshaun Watson had some plays that he would definitely like back, but he made more throws and plays as the game went on that led me to believe he's just working out the kinks. He's getting back into it. And even more encouraging, I thought, and I'm not the biggest Stefanski fan at all. Don't like him at all, to be honest. But there was guys open all over the place. And probably due to conditions or not comfortable throwing the ball or just not enough continuity yet, they were still working that out. But you saw the light start to go off a little bit for Deshaun Watson in that offense. I thought Elijah Moore made some pretty good plays, and they did a good job of just creating openings. So if you're the Browns, I think you have to be excited about that. And you have to be excited about how Dawan Jones played coming in for Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin, after the season, ACL, MCL, probably a career ender for him. I don't want to throw that on him, but I believe this is the third year in a row he sustained a major injury. And, when you're as accomplished as he is, you've made as much money as he is, passion probably ain't died. He probably still loves the game and wishes he can do it. But when you sustain injury after injury after injury like this, it may be hard. So I think, especially with the investment they made with Dawan, even though it was a fourth round no-brainer, they still made the investment and they got him a ton of reps in the preseason. I think they have to be feeling pretty good about their draft process, one, and two, the guy that they picked. Because there was other guys that had talent available, but they picked Dawan, and I think it's already paying off for him a little bit. I'm not going to, toot the horn too bad. He has to play T.J. Watt this week, so we'll see how he handles T.J. Watt. But Trey Henderson and Sam Hubbard aren't no slouches. So if you start off pretty good against them, we have to figure that even if you have a rough week here or there, that you could grow into it. So that's my biggest takeaway from that game. But other than that, I wouldn't worry too bad about it. I mean, Joe Mixon had a pretty game for the Bengals, and those 50-50 balls and Joe Burrow in non-inclement weathers, I'll probably take those guys in a battle 8 times out of 10. So I think they'll be okay overall.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. So particularly in regards to the separation aspect, it's not their game. It's not. But so I don't think that was something new. And
Right.
I've watched 12 of the 16 games this week with no distractions. All 12 of them from start to finish, no distractions. And the other ones I've seen when other games were on, but I've gone back and I've watched this one I watched. Like, I'm telling you, even when Burrow had opportunity to throw and there were guys open, they were not connecting. And he has too much experience at this point. He has too many skins on the wall for it to be that he doesn't know where his receiver is supposed to be. They've been the same offense playing together for a while, right? There were some issues with the O-line periodically, specifically on the right side, where Jonah Williams went over. But nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. And yes, he was beat up, but also he just didn't trust himself to get the ball where it needed to be. And as the game went on and they got farther behind, he tried more. But frankly, he just couldn't put the ball in the places that he wanted to. And I do believe the weather is the reason for the most part, and I believe it's because his hands are smaller and he just can't grip the ball as easily when it's wet. And I didn't expect
somebody
that,
else said that it could be because he didn't have a lot of practice in the preseason. I forgot. When guys come out and then we hear about these injuries, and then 3 weeks goes by, you don't hear anything about it. You don't hear any updates. I kind of forgot that he even was injured in the first place. But I didn't even take into consideration that he is coming off the injury. He hasn't had a ton of time in practice reps, and I mentioned that for the offensive line last night. That I think the lack of preseason action is hurting a lot of these teams, especially up front in the quarterback wide receiver connection. I thought it was the worst week of quarterback play in the NFL that I've seen in maybe a decade. I would say maybe 4 or 5 quarterbacks played well yesterday.
Yeah,
maybe.
I agree, and I think that happens every year now, and we just forget about it because it fades away after a couple of weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think a lot of the defensive coverages too. I mean, people are just. It was starting to be a trend the last couple of years, but it was stringent yesterday. The amount of too high three high safeties that we saw. I think the only team that went, and we'll talk about them later, but the only team that went press man or cover one most of the game was the Chargers. And people, I have a lot of thoughts about that because people gave them all kind of credit and props for having the balls to do it last year, and it worked. And then they did it Sunday, and they got shredded and ate apart. So you can't have it both ways. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I thought a lot of the shell coverage that we're seeing, and then just the tricky stuff, some Tampa 2 stuff sprinkled in there, which I had a huge debate. A lot of people, a couple of football guys, were saying that Tampa 2 is really just cover 3. It's just a different look to get to it, which is
that's like the new thing that everybody's talking about now.
Which I think is stupid because it eliminates the surprise factor. And if you have tendencies and people evaluate you and watch it, it's not necessarily a surprise, but it makes you think about it still. The way you get to that 3, the way you get to have 3 deep players is what makes Tampa 2 Tampa 2. You don't show it right off the ball. So even if it's something that you are accustomed to doing, it's something that's a part of your identity, your calling card, pre-snap, you have no idea. He could come, he could bail to a certain side of the field, he could be getting back and playing, that middle of the field and closing off the middle of the field. You don't know. It's based off of the alignment, which is why it's called Tampa 2, because you start off with 2 high safeties. It's as simple as that. But you see a lot of it in the NFL, and I think that people are just tired of getting beat over the top. I mean, you can't let these guys just run roughshod over you and get beat over the top, which is why you have to be able to run the football again. And it's funny. I think that the Bengals are going to be okay because I was encouraged with their run game yesterday. I thought Joe Mixon started off the game very, very well before the Browns got into the flow of things, and Schwartz got a little bit more aggressive defensively. But I wouldn't panic too much about the Bengals. I'm seeing a lot of Bengals panicking. I've doubted them over the last 3 years, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to doubt them anymore. We prove to be that consistent over the course of years, and you retain most of that, nucleus. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I have all the respect for Joe Burrow as a player, and I don't think that this is going to be a big issue. I mean, he is a player who we have literally watched him week to week improve. It's very specific ways. So if there is anybody who can learn and adjust and do what needs to be done, it's him. I have no doubt. And then on the Brown side of things, agreed. Dawan Jones did a nice job coming in for an injured Jack Conklin. And, we both really liked him. I speak for myself, at least. I really liked him coming in to the draft. And I know that there were some character questions, certainly some stuff like that we witnessed firsthand at the Senior Bowl. And then, there were some other things that were kind of put out there as well. So it's not really a surprise that he fell, but it's also not a surprise that he might be one of the more pro-ready offensive linemen that we'll see this year as rookies. So hopefully for the Browns' sake, he does a nice job. And I will also say that Deshaun Watson did have a good game overall. He definitely settled in. He definitely seemed to be getting confidence as the game went along. He had a couple of moments here or there, but by the end of it, the total package was pretty effective and pretty positive. He showed his athleticism. He showed his ability to throw on the run. He showed his ability to escape the pocket and do all the things that made him a very good player in years prior before he missed all the time. So, I don't want to anoint the Browns, but I will say that
not at all.
they had a good start to their season for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the AFC North as a whole, with the exception of one team that I don't worry about because they have one of these games every year, I thought the AFC North looks very, very solid in the trenches, and it's going to be it's always war in that division, but it's going to be even more interesting this year. So I'm excited about the AFC North.
All right. Speaking of, the 49ers go into the Steelers, and even though this wasn't the largest score differential of the week, it was one of the more decisive games of the week. Steelers couldn't really do a whole heck of a lot offensively. They have tremendous talent on defense, and they definitely made plays, but they were not consistent enough plays to stop the 49ers. The 49ers, they bled the clock with all of their completions, with all of the running. It was a pretty fast-moving game, especially when they had the ball. The Steelers' offensive line just couldn't hold up. And let's be honest, with Nick Bosa getting his contract done and being in the fold, between him, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, and apparently Drake Jackson, who has emerged, and he looks huge. That man looks so big.
Hey,
And
listen, I tweeted out before the season. I was watching him in the preseason. I said he's going to get 8+ sacks this year. And I didn't think it was going to look nearly, I only gave him 8. 8 is a very
he's got
good.
3 already.
Yeah, if you can get 8 sacks a year, you're going to get paid a lot of money in NFL.
Yeah.
But he's already got 3 after week 1. I'm like, oh my God, I probably undershot him a little bit.
Well, we'll see. He probably won't keep up that pace, but he looks big and he looks strong and he looks good. And that is just a tremendous defensive line. And then, the linebackers behind him and then the secondary behind them. It's a phenomenal defense. So, again, I don't know how much you can put on the Steelers. I will say this. The play calling was very pedestrian. The play calling was it was barely more exciting than what the Jets put out there with Zach Wilson tonight, and he's supposed to be their starter.
I don't know, but I don't know if it's Kenny Pickett or the offensive line. And this is why I'm going to shoot Matt Canada a little bit, Bill. I don't. How much?
You're the only one in this country who is.
Well, listen. Somebody sent me a stat last night that in his 36 or something games he's been the offensive coordinator, they haven't gone over 400 yards once. So they do have a Matt Canada problem. But I think they do also have a personnel problem, and they've had the personnel problem for a very long time. And I think it coincides with how bad they've been on offense. So I am saying that they have a Matt Canada offense. I'm just not putting all yesterday on them because they just got their ass kicked up front. Like run game, passing game didn't matter.
Yeah, that's true. It was not good. I mean, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to pick up the conversation from there, but yes, they got their butts kicked badly.
What do you think about it? Listen, if TJ Watt hadn't been TJ Watt, if they didn't have TJ Watt in that game, it's probably 47-0 49ers. He got them the ball back twice, I believe. He ended like 3 or 4 drives, just helped them get off the field. If TJ Watt was not playing for the Steelers yesterday, that would have been. I think it was a more decisive win than Giants and Cowboys, just the way the game played out.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was better on both sides of the ball. The 49ers, I will say it was the most decisive performance. I don't know if it was, I mean, if you want to really get into the nuance of the word, then whatever, doesn't really matter. But their offense and defense combined made them look like the best team out of any team this weekend. I will say that. And I will also say that TJ Watt did a phenomenal job. He's on my fantasy team. He scored 47 freaking points. So, I appreciate that. He had 2 forced fumbles. One, I think he recovered, and the other one was recovered by Brock Purdy. So he only got the ball back once in that sense. But he was in the backfield all the time. He was making plays. He was doing all kinds of TJ Watt things. And I do think that their secondary is underwhelming, aside from the superstar All-Pro that is Minkah Fitzpatrick. But, I mean, they haven't really made any notable effort to improve it in years. They haven't drafted a cornerback in the first round since I don't even know when the last one was. It's been a long time. They've just been cycling through vets like Joe Hayden and Levi Wallace and now Patrick Peterson and whoever. And so they haven't really made a notable effort there. Yeah, I mean, I think, and now with Cam Hayward going to be out for a while, their defense it's going to rely heavily on those 2 star players. But I don't know. I think offensively is really where the Steelers are held back, because if they are kept in a game, that defense can make enough plays to be viable. I think that they don't have an abundance of playmakers. They've got a bunch of guys that are decent enough. They've got Deontay Johnson. He left the game with an injury, but I'm not sure how long that will last. And then George Pickens is big time in terms of what he can do at the catch point, but I'm still not sure exactly how consistent of a separator he is. And then Najee Harris, I think, is a good back, but I don't think he's a great back. And I think the offensive line is it's not that great. I mean, they drafted a tackle in the first round, and he's not on the field right now, so maybe we'll see that change in the near
Yeah.
future. But just across the
Personnel issue.
board,
You're describing the personnel issues that I was talking about earlier. It's just, I think
I'm
it's
talking about
equally.
half of it's defensive. I'm saying like you should be able to get by with that. You should be able to get by with that.
But you know what they have? Like, how many? Is it 17 now? Straight seasons that Tomlin has had at least a 500 record. So they've been getting by. But like, is that good enough in Pittsburgh? Is it really? Like, it shouldn't be. If it is, and that we've reached a sad point in the NFL, the state of the NFL, because average isn't good enough, and I think being average is overachieving with that roster, and that sucks to say about one of the premier franchises in the National Football League.
Well, look, they've drafted well. They've drafted well this year,
Yeah,
I would say. I think they did a phenomenal job. This was the first year with what's his name? He's the new GM, who just took over. It'll come to me in a minute, but so he just took over. This was his first draft. Drafted Broderick Jones in the first. We both really liked that. Took Joey Porter Jr. in the second. I thought that's good value for him, and stylistically is a good fit. So maybe he'll come in and he'll fix some of those issues as he develops a little bit. I cannot believe that they got Darnell Washington in the third round, and that's also going to help their offensive line too if they want to live in 12 personnel a little bit more. Because I know they like Pat Freiermuth as their starter right now, but like I think there are pathways for the personnel to improve. New starter at left tackle, first round, Washington, who's half a lineman himself, if not
Mhm.
3/4, and then Peterson in the secondary, or the new kid, Porter Jr. in the secondary. So they've built themselves a situation where like they recognize the problems, but I just feel like, maybe they're gonna play a much lesser defense next week, and we'll all feel a lot better about it. But ultimately, I do think that the play calling it's relatively uninspired, and I will hope for more as the season progresses. 49ers, man, what do they not have? Tell me what they don't have on that
I
team.
don't. I'm not sure if they have a Super Bowl level quarterback yet, and I think they have a quarterback that's solid enough to get the ball where it needs to be right now. But I mean, we haven't seen it sustained. We haven't seen it in the biggest moments. I don't know if they have a Super Bowl winning quarterback yet, and that's been the same question that they've had for the last 6 years. So I think it's more or less the same exact team. The rest of the pieces look fantastic. Purdy looks solid. I mean, he looked solid like he looked last year. He doesn't look much better than Jimmy G though. He doesn't move me much more than Alex Smith did when he was there. Like, I don't know if they have the guy that can go win you the game when your defense isn't having their best day. Can they win a Chiefs Bills 2021 playoff game with Brock Purdy at quarterback? Can they win a Bengals Chiefs 2021 AFC Championship game where the Bengals come back in the second half down by 14 or 20 points, whatever it was, with Brock Purdy at quarterback? That's the question I have about that team. Luckily enough for them, they don't have to answer it for another 6 months. So they're good enough, and they'll be good enough to win a bunch of games. They'll win double-digit games this regular season. I'm sure he'll look fine because he's a fine quarterback in a great system with a great supporting cast. But that is the only question that I have for this team. Can they come from behind and beat teams in the playoffs, or can they blow teams out to where it's not even close and it doesn't matter in the playoffs? I don't know if they have that guy quarterback yet, and it remains to be seen. But like I said with the Jets, I mean, they have a quarterback where the floor is high enough. He's of the Jimmy G ilk. Like, the floor is high enough to where we'll probably get a chance to see it.
I think it's a nuanced question, and I don't think there's a singular answer to that, because let's look at it this way, right? Josh Allen in his first year as a starter was bad. He was outright bad. His second year, they made the playoffs, and he was improved, but he still looked pretty bad in the playoff loss. I'm pretty sure they lost to the Texans that year, and it was pretty ugly. Then his third year, is when he really stepped up and became special, right? Mahomes, he played in one game as a rookie, and he won MVP in his second year, right? I mean, who are we comparing him to? We're comparing him a guy who's, you know, was bottom of the depth chart as a rookie and is now playing in his first full season as a starter, which is his second year. So if you're asking me, do I think right now in this moment, is he good enough to win a game like that against those guys? I don't know. Maybe not. He doesn't have to because the team around him is so good. But do I think that he could be by the end of this season? He might be pretty close, honestly, because I think he's good, man. I think he's really good. I think his poise is truly rare for a player as young as he is. I look around the league and I see these guys drafted highly, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. I don't see poise like he has shown in his few starts out of just about anybody, but maybe Burrow out of all those guys. Go back to 2019, go back to 2018, whatever. I don't see this natural poise that he has in just about anybody else. And maybe he doesn't have the same physical tools, but honestly, he's he's got some of the most important stuff to be a good quarterback. So I think he's going to be good. I honestly do. I think he's just going to get better. But aside from that, yeah, if a quarterback who might turn out to be really good is your biggest weakness, then you're playing with house money at that point. So we'll see. The 49ers do have to contend with an overall lesser conference. I think it's what most of us think. So they do have a relatively clear pathway to get to the playoffs, and then from there we shall see. And the Steelers, they're going to have to show a lot more if they do want to make it themselves. All right, so this will be the last game that we talk about today. We have the Miami Dolphins traveling across the country to Los Angeles to play against the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is a game where the Chargers should have won this game. They should have won this game. I don't know how you feel about it, but I felt like there were a number of major mistakes that really cost them substantially. Just to start with, I mean, for J.C. Jackson to run that interception out of the end zone and to put his team at his own 4-yard line,
It's just like a situational awareness.
Stupid, so dumb. Like that was so dumb, and they ended up getting sacked on the 1-yard line, and then they punted the ball, and they had no room, so they punted the ball at like 40 yards or whatever, and gave the Dolphins incredible field position for a quick score. And it was that. And then what was the other one? With the field goal. Oh, what did they do? Oh, I watched this game this morning. They what did they do? They did something and caused the Dolphins to have a chance at a field goal. It was a penalty. They gave the Dolphins a chance to get into field goal range like right before the half, and they ended up losing by 2 points. So it's like they basically handed over that 3 points on a silver platter. And then there was some other stuff too that was just stupid. But look, Tua had a good game statistically. He got very lucky. He had a few really good plays. He had a few plays where he got really lucky that he didn't turn the ball over. And he's also lucky that Tyreek Hill is on his team because he is freaking incredible player. But just frustrating. Very frustrating to watch that unfold with a team that's like it's Super Bowl or bust at this point because like they barely got to the playoffs and it's just they've got issues. So I know that you have all kinds of opinions on this game because one, you're a Dolphins supporter, and two, you have major issues with the Chargers coaching staff for quite a while at this point. So I'll let you dive in here and kind of get anything that you need to say off your chest. I want to figure out what was the exact circumstances of the play that resulted in the Dolphins getting an extra field goal attempt there.
Well, I just want to start off first by saying I have to give all the credit in the world to this offensive line of the Miami Dolphins. It's the only thing in this game that nobody's talking about. Everybody has an opinion about this, or this, but I don't see much of anybody giving the Miami Dolphins offensive line any credit. 2 years ago, they were a bottom 2 offensive line of all time, according to stats, according to rushing stats and passing statistics. Last year, they made it elite with the addition of Teron Armstead to be a mediocre, still a bottom tier offensive line. Going into this year, they're playing with 3 guys. That one is a castaway. I think he's a solid vet. Isaiah Wynn. He's played a little bit all over the offensive line. Played some tackle. Played inside a guard. Veteran guy. Been banged up a lot with injuries. Hasn't played great as of late. But a guy that you can take a risk on when you have guys that are underperforming, as the Miami Dolphins have. And they got him. Kendall Lamb, another guy who was a backup, rotational swing guy, barely making it on practice squads or 53s. He's a swing guy, the definition of a swing guy. And Austin Jackson, who was drafted in the first round, has been getting beat inside, outside, hasn't played very good much of his entire career. His career is on the line this year in terms of big money getting paid, that type of situation. You start him at right tackle. You start Kendall Lamb at left tackle. You have Connor Williams at center. You have Robert Hunt at guard, who's been there for 3 years. And that group of unsung heroes played the best game of their life. Tua dropped back, I believe, 40-plus times, didn't get hit, got hit, but didn't give up a sack, only gave up, I believe it was 3 pressures. And you saw what type of quarterback he can be once he gets time. He shredded them for the entire game. I think there was a couple plays. I would say there's 2 turnover-worthy plays, or 3 turnover-worthy plays. The one where he threw the interception in the end zone, which was people were debating if that was pass interference or not. I thought it was questionable, but I still think the ball shouldn't have even been thrown. You don't need to be throwing jump balls to River Craycraft. That's not the guy you want to throw 50-50 jump balls to. And there was the one right before half where he ended up getting the pass interference, which is probably just trying to throw it up and make a play, which I'm not too concerned about. But I thought he did a great job of not putting the ball in harm's way over the middle of the field or to the outside boundary, to the outside throws, opposite field. Did a great job of not putting the ball in harm's way on those throws. And I got to give the offensive line and those receivers and quarterback to attack all the credit in the world because they responded every time. This was not a one-sided game. This was not a game where they got a big lead. They actually had a little bit of adversity to start the game. Tua is making great throws. They're driving the field, and then boom, you get a botch snap where Connor Williams gets excited and snaps it under his butt, and there's a fumble. Boom, Chargers get the ball, go score. There's a sudden change in the opposite momentum shift right off the bat, and then what do? They come right back the next drive, respond. Tua has. I thought he did more creating than he's ever done in his career in that game. He's always been very good with instruction. He's always been very precise with his passes. He didn't do anything special to me yesterday. It's what he's done over the course of his career outside of, I would say, the Pittsburgh game, which was his first game back after the concussion in Cincinnati. The Chargers game last year, Sunday Night Football, was a bad game. And I would say the Sunday Night Football, the Sunday to clinch in the playoffs in 2021, the rain game against the Titans, where he had an interception that was raining. It was terrible. I think that was one of his worst games of his career as well. Outside of those 3 just actually bad games, he's been at minimum a game manager and at best a guy that wins you football games with his precision, his accuracy, and his anticipation to go along with the guys that he has at receiver, like a Tyreek Hill and a Jayden Waddle, that when they get those balls in those positions can take it from a 20-yard game to a 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown. But he led the NFL again this week. For all the talk about his arm, he led the NFL again this week in pass completions of 20 yards or more. He also led the NFL in pass completions of 30, 40, 50 yards or more. So there was, I think he did a lot of what he's always done. It's just never been this clean of an operation. And I think that had a lot to do with the offensive line, the play caller, and the receivers doing their part and getting open because it wasn't always just wide open. A lot of these are whole window throws that close in an instant. So if the ball's not out when it needs to be, and if these guys don't run the route with the exact timing, is those are interceptions, or those are a ball that you catch and you get tackled and it's a 10-yard gain instead of a 30, 40, maybe a touchdown. So it's all about rhythm and timing and precision. And everybody was doing their job yesterday. And I even thought that they should have run the ball more because they were effective running the ball when they did. They just didn't choose to. So I was really, really impressed with the with the Dolphins offense, and I was really unimpressed with the Chargers defense for all the hype, all the money, everything that was talked about. I thought they played terrible. I thought the defensive backs were terrible. I thought the pass rush was terrible. I mean, listen, we can give them all the excuses in the world.
I don't want to say it was terrible. It's a little aggressive. I will say that it was bad, but honestly, so much of it was J.C. Jackson, particularly. Honestly, like he was by far the worst player on their defense. And I
they didn't get any pass rush against backup tackles. I think that's for me even more than that.
They had pass rush, but it just didn't quite get home. It wasn't great. It was not super great, but I saw Joey Bosa winning reps, and Tua was just getting the ball out faster than he could get there, right? And there's only so much you can do about that. But first of all, just to point this out, the defense of the Chargers was not great, but there was one person who was more responsible for that than anybody else. All right, J.C. Jackson. In the span of a very small amount of time, he dramatically swung things in the Dolphins' favor. Okay, so one, his interception in the end zone, and then he decides to bring it out for some unknown reason, which sets the Chargers up on their own 4-yard line. They move the ball slightly forward, then they end up getting sacked at their own 1-yard line. And it's a terrible punt because they have no room. And then it's a single quick strike to Tyreek Hill, beating J.C. Jackson for a touchdown. So that's 7 points right there. Or 6. They may have missed a field goal or extra point, or maybe that was later. But then, right before the half, the Chargers score. They kick the kickoff. It's a touchback. Tua has a quick completion to the sideline, and it is a quick completion out of bounds. 2 seconds left on the clock. All they have time for is a Hail Mary. You remember that?
Yeah, I mean, terrible.
2 seconds, Hail Mary. That's all you got. And Tua doesn't have the strongest arm. And this is not I'm not shaking him. This is, he cannot get the ball all the way to the end zone, more than likely, right? So they're all lined up just inside the end zone or just in front of the end zone, right? It's prevent, Hail Mary defense. Tua throws the ball up. For some unknown reason, J.C. Jackson commits pass interference. Like, why even bother? Just let the guy catch the ball and tackle him. He's way short of the end zone. He's like 20 yards short of the end zone. But instead,
I think that's what happens when you're playing guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Though, you panic when you're facing that type of speed on the outside. You don't know where the ball is.
It was Eric.
Those type of guys, you're playing against those guys all day. You panic. You don't know where the ball is. You can't find the ball.
That is such a cop out.
I mean, listen. I'm just saying, like, of all the problems with that game, J.C. Jackson is. They picked on him, but they picked on Kenneth Murray more, in my opinion, especially over the middle of the field. He bit so much on play action, on motion. The middle of the field was open in a lot of areas. J.C. Jackson being a mismatch is more on the coaching staff than J.C., in my opinion. When you're playing him the way they did in press against these guys, and Kenneth Murray's biting, you're not getting any pass rush, you're leaving him on an untenable. You cannot guard those guys with that much space. It's not possible. The only reason it worked last year is because of the pass rush, because they were disciplining linebacker and they took away those hole throws over the middle of the field that Tua was accustomed to getting, and their defensive backs were able to play very good man covers. I don't want to just pick on JC because it's the sum of the whole. It's not just him. Everything went together, and he's just the guy that has to take all the punches in the face.
That's still a direct pathway to points. You went from guaranteeing they would have no points by just tackling him and he wasn't even going to catch the ball anyway. It was broken up by somebody else on the Chargers. So it was an unnecessary penalty. And because it was a defensive penalty, you can't end the half, right? You have to get another offensive play off. So with 2 seconds left, the clock runs to 0. Then they get the extra play, kick a field goal, and they lose by 2 points. It's a 3-point swing just then and there, aside from the other stuff I talked about. It's just it's frustrating to watch for a team that's supposed to be good, well over 500 yards of defense, mental mistakes like that. It's just, they're not good enough. They're just not good enough. I also absolutely hate that they took Quentin Johnston, and I know it's early, but you look at Jordan Addison, who I thought was the perfect fit for what they didn't have there. They pass on him to take Quentin Johnston, and Quentin Johnston has 9 yards, 2 catches for 9 yards, and then you've got Jordan Addison going off for Minnesota and having a really nice game. It's like, why? It should not be that hard, man. It should not be that hard to put together this kind of team. Like, so many good players, and they feel like they're just missing their window.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the sum of, like I said, it's the sum of the whole, like, from the top to the bottom. I don't think Brandon Staley should be the head coach right now. I think they made Lombardi the scapegoat, and I don't think the offense, listen, I love Kellen Moore, and I thought the offense was more balanced than it's been in a while. But, and I'm not putting on the offense at all, but I don't think the offense was infinitely better than it was last year. I don't think the offense has been the issue with the team. I think not being able to stop the run, not being able to get off the field on third downs, in crunch moments. I think if you look at the stats overall, they're not a bad team getting off the field on third down, but in big moments, and when it was time to get off the field on third down against the Jaguars, they could not do it. When it's time to get off the field against the Miami Dolphins yesterday, they could not do it. We're not talking about third and short. We're talking about third and 12. We're talking about third and long. So I think it's just the entire organization as a whole, some of the personnel decisions that they've made. I don't think they have any beef up front to combat teams running the ball up the middle. I don't think they have the pass rushers opposite the two guys that they paid all that money to that can really come in and be consistent and spill those guys. Joey Bosa is getting up there in age, and he's banged up, he's injured. Khalil Mack is 33, I believe. You can double check or quote me. Don't quote me on that, but he's getting up there in age. He doesn't need to be the primary rusher the entire game anymore. I think you need to use him like the Bills used Von Miller last year. I thought the Bills used Von Miller perfectly last year with his snap count, but they don't have the personnel to do that. So I'm really just saying, I think the roster is nowhere near as good as everybody thought it was, and it's just a team that looks really good on paper. And we need to read the tea leaves here. It's been this way for a couple years.
Yeah, we'll see, but we may well be looking at the last season as currently assembled. All right, so let's run through the final games here. There's quite a few of them, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to mention the game, give a quick take, and then let you respond, and then we'll move on. So the Houston Texans hosted the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens hosted the Texans. So Ravens win 25-9. Major takeaways here that the offense is built well in terms of the personnel, but they still need a little time to come together. And as far as the Texans go, they have a rookie at quarterback, and they don't really have a lot of weapons, so it's bound to not look very good. The other thing is that their rusher Jonathan Grenard was distinctly better than their third overall pick Will Anderson right now. So we'll see how some of that shakes out. But
you think so?
I thought so. Yeah. I mean,
he broke tied a rookie record for the most pressures in the game. He had 6, and then he had a sack in the fourth quarter. So I haven't busted all 22 of that one yet, but talking to my friend DJ the Enemy, he said he thought he had a hell of a game. So I have to go back and watch it before I can, give my opinion about it. But because listen, pressures are subjective here. Like, everybody has a different way they record pressures or hurries, whatever the case may be. But I did see that he had a sack, and people were saying that he was disruptive. So that's interesting. But listen, that's a great problem if a guy is doing that, and you think the guy opposite him is even a clear step ahead of him. That's a great quote unquote problem to have. You want that.
But yeah, so those are just my main takeaways from that game. It didn't really play out any different than I thought it would. I just felt like the Ravens need a little bit more time to kind of put everything together the way they would like. Obviously, losing J.K. Dobbins for the rest of the season stinks. It's an Achilles, so who knows what his career will look like going forward, and that's a shame. But aside from that, they are likely to be pretty darn good. We had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the Minnesota Vikings. Buccaneers won 20-17. All right, this is one of the games that I did not go and watch a second time. I was watching it periodically while all the other games were going on yesterday, but I haven't gone back and looked at it closely yet because I knew we were going to talk about it in depth tonight. But I will say that, the Vikings offense, it doesn't look as good as people kind of expected it to. And the defense is not yet significantly better than last year. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much more about it without actually watching it play to play.
Yeah, what did you think about the weekend overall, man? Like, I saw some people complaining about the quality of the game, but I'm like, listen, it's week one, bro, and the preseason has not given us the sharpest product in week one, but I thought it was incredibly entertaining. Like for it to be week one, the amount of storylines we have, the amount of close games that we had, I thought it was a great product. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think if they're here for the offense only, then yeah, maybe it was a little disappointing. But if you're here for football and you like both sides of the ball, then we had good games because we had a lot of things that we didn't necessarily anticipate. Like if you follow these rookies, these second-year players, if you know who they are, I got a lot out of watching those guys and seeing how they played. I mean, I still need to watch the Rams and Seahawks back, but they had guys Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua going off like that. I want to see. I want to see how that actually played out. I watched the Titans and Saints game, man, and I was like, this is hard fought football. Like this is not bad football just because the score is low, right? And it's interesting to see how that's going to play out too. And we had 3 rookie quarterbacks starting as well, so I don't know. What are people complaining about, man? I thought it was good. I thought we got everything. I thought we got good defense, got some good offense,
But this is what I had a theory because it pissed me off, and I was talking about it. And somebody said yesterday that Jalen Hurts finally woke up in reference to him, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like he's playing Bill Belichick's defense in Foxborough. It's the best defense in the NFL at taking away what you're good at taking away your strength and making them beat them another way. And that's what the Eagles did. I don't think Jalen Hurts played exceptional, but I don't think he played bad. They went on the road in Foxborough, which is one of the hardest things to do in football. I mean, look at their defense year after year. It's top 10. They force a lot of turnovers. They play pesky defense, confusion with a ton of coverages. It's very, very hard to go in there and win and just make it look easy. And first of all, it's the NFL, man. It's like people have gotten so used to like they see Patrick Mahomes or some of these quarterbacks and they make it look quote unquote easy. I'm like, bro, this is not how football has historically been. You guys just started watching football in 2019 for fantasy teams, and like you just want to see points. That's not how the game is played. That's not how football is won, bro. Like it is hard to win and make it look easy.
By the way, Bill Belichick has had since the draft to scheme for this game.
Right.
He is maybe the best defensive schemer of all time, right?
I don't think, you know what? You can say maybe, but I don't think it's even a debate.
Okay,
like,
so right,
Bill, bro.
I don't love to speak in absolutes, but yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you. But the schedule comes out the week after the draft. That is months and months and months for Belichick to just put together exactly how he wants to beat this team. This team that went to the Super Bowl last year, right? He knows exactly what he wants to do. He has an entire resume of film. Now, I know it's a different offensive coordinator, but he has an entire resume of film because they're not going to change things that much because they know what it is that Hurts does well, right? Like they know how they got there. They know where their bread's buttered. So Belichick knew exactly
Yeah.
the kind of things that they're going to try and attempt to do.
They have really good players on that defense, man. I was really impressed with Christian Gonzalez. I can't believe they let Bill get that guy. Some of the plays he made on the ball yesterday were just incredible, man. So Matthew Judon looked like a bat out of hell. I mean, I think he has already a sack and a half, 2 sacks. I can't remember if it was a tackle for loss or they counted as a sack. Neither here nor there. But man, they have some really good players on that defense, man. Like that's just not how football is played, and it's very, very tough to win football games week after week.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other thing too. It's like some of this stuff that happened shouldn't be surprising. Like the Packers beating up on the Bears. Like I'm sorry, Bears fans, but I didn't know that they were going to win by 18 points or whatever. But like I knew that they were going to win. This is a good team, a good offensive line, a very good defense, good running backs, and some skill players who could use some seasoning, but they're talented players. And the Bears are still kind of far away from being good enough from a personnel standpoint to really compete. Like it just doesn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form. And I am surprised that people are surprised. Like this is a given to me. You know what I mean? Did you catch much of that game? How did you feel about that one?
Well, I didn't catch a ton of it, but I mean, what do you think is the solution though? Like, I'm interested about that.
Well, okay, so this was one of the games that I went back and watched because I just like I said, I saw almost all the games to some degree, and I've gone back and watched play to play as many of them as I could before we did the show tonight. And this one I was curious about because I wanted to kind of know what the answer to that was. And ultimately, it's the offensive line was a problem, right? They just couldn't get things blocked up the way that they needed to. But they distinctly wanted Fields to stay in the pocket and pass the ball more, right? They didn't want him rushing every play and getting the crap kicked out of him like by a quarter of the way through the season. And they were not really very successful at that. Now, I haven't watched the all 22, right? And I don't necessarily know if it's about guys not getting open, but I will tell you this. DJ Moore had 2 targets or something, 3 targets, maybe 2 catches. And so it's like you make such a point of going out and getting this guy and you aren't scheming up plays for him. Like I don't really know. The run game was not super effective, but at the same time, like at the end of the day, the Packers they have every opportunity to be in the top 5 or better defenses this year.
Yeah, I tweeted that earlier because I did see some of the. I caught the game late, so I caught the game probably about halfway through the third quarter when the Packers defensive line was just dominating. So I caught the game like right when all the blunders started to happen. But I think it was telling that when his blunders started to happen, they were already down. Well, it was 17-6 or 23-6. So I don't know how much effect it actually had on the ball game. I think at that point he's just forcing balls, trying to make something happen because they've been dominated all game. But from when I picked up, the defensive line was dominating. Especially what I noticed, and I'm glad you brought this game up. I noticed the younger guys. We know what Kenny Clark is. We know what Preston Smith and some of those guys are. Lucas Van Ness, Carl Brooks, and Kobe Wooden all played significant snaps yesterday, and I thought that was important to note because they aren't just drafting guys and hoping that they contribute, developing them. They're getting them in the fire now, and those guys produce. Lucas Van Ness had a tackle for loss. Carl Brooks had a sack. Kobe Wooden, I believe, only had 2 tackles, but I saw him making plays in the goal line in some short yardage areas, which he's not struggled with at Auburn, but he was more of a hold the point of attack, shock and shed, pass rusher. He was more, I won't say finesse, but he had a little bit of versatility to his game. But to see him develop and be a little bit more of a stuffer, which is what they may need at some of the positions they'll have him play all over the defensive line, was really important. So, and I agree with you. I think it was the offensive line more than anything that I saw, because it's like, how are you going to fully evaluate this guy when you are calling all the routes at or behind the line of scrimmage or no more than 5 yards down the field. And when you are doing it, it's in obvious passing situations when you're down 17 or 24 points against one of the best defensive fronts and defensive backfields in the NFL, and you're just saying, go make chicken salad with chicken, you know what. And it's
Mhm.
like, I don't think that's a fair evaluation of the guy, but I think we heard all season how much better they're going to look, and then they completely crapped the bed. And when the game's close, it was in range, and that's when
Yeah.
we saw everything fall apart.
Yeah, it wasn't immediately a blowout. It gathered steam for sure. I mean, Devontae Wyatt had a really athletic play. He had a sack and a half, and his solo sack was he wasn't blocked, but Justin Fields tried to escape him in the open field, and he made the tackle, which was very impressive. And then he had another half sack on top of that. He looked really good. Rashawn Gary looked good. Everybody looked good. The interception that Fields threw to Quay Walker was a pretty bad decision. He just tried to force it. I don't know if he didn't see him, but like you said, it was late in the game, so it was. I don't know how much you want to put it on him. It definitely put the Packers over the top, but at the same time, it was already moving in that direction. But the reality is that they were just a better team from start to finish. The Bears defense was bad as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
It's funny. The biggest question going into the season probably was the pass rush, and I thought the pass rush was the best thing about it. Yannick Ngakoue had a couple sacks, or I think they only credited him for one, then one as a tackle for loss. Because of I don't know, they do tricky with some of the RPO stuff. I don't know if they classify it as a run or a pass in live action,
Mhm.
but he made 2 tackles for loss, had a sack, was very disruptive. And man, the linebackers that they spent all that money on. It's only week 1. You never want to go too far, but they spent all that money on their linebackers and they couldn't cover any of those running backs in space. It was just shocking to see almost.
Yeah, but it's not surprising because the guys that they just took guys who are good at doing certain things and gave them all this money and put them there. I mean, yeah, Tremaine Edmonds, like he made a big stick in the backfield, but he's always we know he can do that. Like if he sees it and he can shoot the gap and he can make a play, but like he's not the headiest of players. I mean, Eddie Jackson is a good player, but at this point in his career, he's getting older and he's coming off of injury. And
Yeah.
Kyler Gordon had a nice play in there, but like overall, they don't have the guys.
And it's not like, listen, Jordan Love played fine, but a lot of his explosive plays were just wide open. Like he's literally breaking free from the pocket a couple times, and literally he's sidearm just lobbing it up, and the guy is wide open. It's like it wasn't a good throw. He just happened to get the ball off. And a lot of those plays were just throw them up 50-50 balls, and Dobbs is catching the ball in the end zone. They didn't even have Christian Watson, which is the speed guy that really breaks their offense open. So, listen, a lot of money spent. A lot of people have been awarding them bail for the process. At least, hey, they're trying this acquisition. They're drafting this. They're acquiring this guy. So, I thought the Claypool deal. I think the Claypool deal looks worse and worse every day. Like the way Claypool played was unacceptable.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, no, he was not good. I mean, there's nothing about his game that impresses me. He's not a good ball player. He's just a big fast guy. He had basically no engagement within the game. Like I think they let me see, they gave him one reception, 1 or 2 receptions, and like he was just tackled at the line of scrimmage. It was.
But I mean, like the effort blocking was abysmal. It was something that as an offensive lineman, I take it very seriously. Like it's something that I always prided in myself and instilled in my teammates that were wide receivers, that blocking on the edge is just as important as what we do on the inside, because you can block it up perfect on the inside and he gets through the crease and cuts it outside. It takes a 5-yard gain from being a touchdown, an explosive play, however much yardage it is, to a 5-yard gain because you aren't blocking your guy. He's spilling off and making a tackle. There was 2 plays that he was the lead blocker on the screen that he just got completely blown up, didn't even show any effort. And the worst part about it is afterwards, this is something that we talked about earlier today. He's sitting there looking to the sideline. He's throwing his hands up, acting like it was somebody else's fault instead of taking accountability, being like, "Oh man, I would rather see the coaches." Coaches hate this in football, but you mess up and then you clap, and everybody's like, "Oh." But at least it's called the loser clap in football world. Coaches hate it, but I would rather see the loser clap than see a guy throw his hands up and act like it was somebody else's fault, or be defiant intentionally because he's not getting the ball enough. I don't know which one it really is with him. If he just doesn't care, or if he's trying to prove a point and get out of there, or he's just trying to be defiant because he's not getting the ball. But you can't win with guys like that. It's disrespectful to your teammates. It's disrespectful to the people that are paying you money. And you can't win football games like that. It's just loser mentality.
Yeah, I will say that Jordan Love did look good. I won't. What he did yesterday didn't put him in the top tier of quarterbacks, but I will say that he looked pretty good out there. The touchdown that he threw to Romeo Doubs was really nice. That was a tight window. Had to really be in a spot, and he did a good job with that, and he did a pretty nice job of avoiding pressure. And I know the play you're talking about to Luke Musgrave, where he just evades, and he just off of one foot he just throws it up.
And then Luke falls when he has a walk-in touchdown.
I know.
But no, I'm glad you brought that up. You said that about Jordan Love, because I did not mean to discredit his performance by any means. The word I used to describe him yesterday, I'm having a talk with all my media guys and whatnot. I said, bro, this was the second possession before. I believe he was 4 for 6 or 4 for 7. He wasn't lighting it up at that point. But I said he looks so comfortable out there. And I said that's something that you cannot underestimate. That's something that you cannot take for granted, because half of the game is just getting to the point where it slows down for you. He didn't look like a rookie because he's not a rookie. He's a guy that's been there for 4 years. He's gone through the meetings. He's been to all the atmospheres. He's been in control of the team a couple times now. He's had some previous experience, and it showed. It looked like a guy that was comfortable in the position, that was sure of himself, and that he didn't have the greatest personnel out there. I mean, they don't have the greatest personnel on offense, but the offensive line did a good enough job, and he just looked so comfortable. He made decisive decisions. I don't think he put the ball in harm's way much of that all. He did his job, man, and that's super encouraging to see from a guy like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and touchdowns matter, right? He threw strikes in the red zone, and that was effective. Jaden Reed looks explosive. I don't really know what I haven't checked up on any of his pre-draft measurements, but he looks like he can fly.
You know what? He actually ran pretty slow. It's funny you say that. I think he ran 4.5. But listen, that was the thing of it. People were shocked because regular season tape and at the Senior Bowl, he had a really good week at the Senior Bowl when we were down there in Mobile. People were kind of shocked he ran what he did, but you can't care about that now. He's out there. I mean, like you said, he looked very good, man. He reminded me of James Jones. He reminds me of that type, the old guys that they've had back in the day. So, and I'm not giving him, James Jones and Donald Driver were really, really good football players. Had Pro Bowl careers, but he's the type of guy that reminds me of. He's built in that type of frame. I think he has some of that same shiftiness. So I'm glad you brought him up, because he's the guy we saw down there in Mobile, and people were kind of half and half on him, but I thought he had a really good week, and he showed up week 1.
Yeah, he's playing, and ultimately, the Bears couldn't stop. They just couldn't stop Aaron Jones. He was by far the biggest weapon in the game, both as a runner and a receiver. It's like anytime the Packers just needed a play, he was the guy who got it done. Aside
he was
from
running so much he tore his hamstring or strained his hamstring. He couldn't take all the running.
Yeah, well, he cramped up, I think is what happened. But I'm
okay. Good. I'm glad. I hope it's a cramp instead of a hammy. But I was like, this guy's running so much he can't take it.
I believe. Yeah. I mean, so he had 86 receiving yards and a touchdown, and then 41 rushing yards and a touchdown, right? So he, well over 100 yards, which is all purpose, and 2 scores. So he's, he made it easy. But also, ultimately, it's he is explosive and fast, but he wasn't doing anything crazy, right? And that's why I put a lot of it on the Bears too. It's you're missing gaps. You're missing tackles. He wasn't single-handedly crushing the Bears. Statistically, you can look at it and assume that, but you know what his game is. He's not like the Saquon Barkley like
Not a
make you
bruiser
miss
by
kind
any
of guy.
means.
No, and
Yeah,
he's not the biggest guy either, right? So it's
yeah.
like it just I don't
I,
know.
I think they're really bad on the interior of their defense. I'm looking at the depth chart now. Demarcus Walker and Yannick Ngakoue are the starters on the outside. Two very good football players that they do two different things very well. Yannick is your pass rush guy. Demarcus Walker is more of a read and react, hold the edge, set the point of attack type of guy with some pass rush ability. But on the inside, you have Justin Jones, Justin Jones, Andrew Billings, Zach Pickens, who's a rookie, and Javon Dexter, who's a rookie. So your four deep is
Yeah.
two older guys who aren't great. They've never been standouts, solid players, but they're more rotational guys, and two rookies that have high upside but have not proven to do anything in the NFL yet. So the interior of their defensive line is going to make it very hard for them to be sustainable in the run game. And I think it puts, while the linebackers still have to be better fitting those gaps, it's hard when you got people in your lap or people getting removed from those gaps. So tough sledding for those guys, but they need some interior help bad.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, they're just not there yet. It's so brutal. Like,
so the question is, I have a question for you to take the floor because you're more the draft guy, the cap guy. How long do we give Ryan Poles to fix it, or we're entering year 2 right now already? I mean, or is it year 2 or year 3? I can't remember. But
this
how
is
long
his
do we give him
second
to
year.
fix it? Okay.
I honestly, I hate to say this, I really do, because I don't like calling for people's jobs,
No,
but I
definitely.
thought it's basically been bad from the start. So, first thing is, yeah, I know you didn't have a first round pick in your first year in because the Justin Fields trade the year before. But
Yeah.
when you come in and you actually want to give this player even any shot to prove himself, you cannot spend your first 2 picks on defensive players. Like, I understand that you really like Brisker. I understand that. I get it. But you've got to find a way to add a quality receiver for him. You've got to do something on the offensive line. Like, you've got to make some moves. You were hamstrung. I get it. But that was the first major misstep. And so
Yeah.
I can't get behind that. And then you go halfway through the season, you see that Fields has all this potential. You see how hard he's working. You see that he's getting the crap kicked out of him. And you're like, okay, I am going to lay down a second round pick, which potentially could be a very high pick, to go get Chase Claypool, right? It ends up being the 32nd overall pick. This is a first round pick.
Right.
First round pick. That I thought was a very bad decision, because even though I really liked Claypool as a idea coming into the draft in 2020 and he showed some stuff, it became pretty clear to me by the end of the 2021 season, certainly part way through the 2022 season, that this guy was not anything. Right? He's unfocused. He doesn't have football awareness. He doesn't have situational awareness. He's just not a good player. And so a second round pick of any kind is a bad move, but a first round pick, it's awful. And you had to know that things weren't going very well for you at that point. So then there's that. And, I guess you got to give him one more season, but the issue is if it's awful, are you giving him one more season to draft a rookie quarterback in the top 5? Or
you just start from ground zero again?
Or are you going to use that to actually build this roster?
But what does that look like? I mean, they had the most cap space in NFL history, I believe it was, this past offseason. Or I don't know if it was NFL history, but I know they had the most cap space in the NFL. We'll just leave it at that because I don't want to say anything false. But you had the most cap space. You had all the draft capital you needed. You traded up to get, or did they trade up or trade? I can't remember if they traded up or traded back, but they traded.
They traded back. They traded back because they had the first overall pick. They accumulated a future first round pick. That move I like. Well,
yes.
Actually,
and they took Darnell Wright with it, and I like Darnell Wright. He played.
Yeah.
I thought he played fine, but you did all that with the movement and the picks, and I don't know if you really have addressed any needs outside of. I mean, tackle was a need. They got him, but they didn't draft very well this year, in my opinion. I don't think they had a very good draft. I think Tyreek Stevenson's a good ball player, and I think Darnell Wright's a good ball player. Zach Perkins and Javon Dexter, the verdict is still out on them. At minimum, they're still developmental projects, which is going to take a year or two, maybe 3. Does the plan allow for Poles to enact his actual vision? And does that include, like you said, a quarterback change? Does it include coordinator overhaul? It's just so many variables that I don't know if we're actually going to see Poles be the beneficiary of his own work if it turns out that it's actually worth it.
Well, I need to pull up here and see if I can find a free agency tracker so I can just double, like, or essentially remind myself of who's available. Because you need to, yeah, I see. Don't have that. I'm just trying to find if there's like, all right. Okay, so let's put it this way, right? You have guys like Javon Hargrave on the market, and he goes for $20 million a year. But you don't go and sign him. You sign Tremaine Edmonds for what, $17 million a year or something crazy like that? Like
That's crazy.
That is an absolutely wild misuse of money, right? Even a guy like Fletcher Cox, who ended up going back to the Eagles, you may have been able to lure him away if you want to overpay him a little bit. Either of those guys go so much farther into improving your roster.
Yeah.
Like who else here? 2023. Okay, we got Javon Hargrave. Yeah, Tremaine Edmonds was the second highest paid, $18 million a year, and you could have gotten Javon Hargrave for 21. You could have brought in Jamel Dean if you really wanted to. Larry Ogunjobi went back. Like Cameron Sutton for $11 million a year. I mean,
I believe Dalvin Tomlinson was available, who's probably a more cost-efficient, very productive player, who's not a superstar, but he's a clear step above what you have. I mean, I thought there was plenty of viable options to bring in there to help them on the interior. Or if you're going to do that, then you really go for it in the draft. If you're going to acquire all the draft capital and have all the money to spend, take some more swings. But I mean, this is why I'm saying if we're going to give them, how much time are we going to give them? Because they did take swings. They acquired a bunch of draft picks. They drafted a tackle. They got paid a lot of money for 2 linebackers. It's very early, so we're not going to jump the gun here. But it may not work out with those guys. So it was the wrong swings potentially. So how much time do we give him if those turn out to be the wrong swings? And you kind of said it might not be very much longer.
Yeah, I mean, if you gave me like an hour or two, I would be able to go down and pick out all of the guys that I would have spent that money on over many of the players that they actually did. And you can always make it work contractually. Like they had all this cap space, but you can technically overspend if you build the contracts that way. And so it's like, if you feel like this guy is really going to help you get better, then you can.
The Browns did it very well.
Well, the Browns, and they're deep in the midst of it. And one of the things is that, teams are afraid to do that for a quarterback they're not sold on. But it's like, if that's how you feel, then why didn't you just draft a quarterback first overall,
right,
and then trade Justin Fields? Because you wouldn't get the same haul, but you would have got a lot. Somebody would have gone out and got him. Because you can, like, if the Jets can trade Sam Darnold for a second and a fourth, because basically they're like, it's a new regime and we have a top 2 pick, then the Bears can very much claim the same thing. They can trade this guy and be like, this is the player that we want. You get some draft capital there, and then you spend all the money on just building up the roster for this rookie. Or you commit to this guy because you traded out of the first overall pick. So it's like, I don't know. I don't see any move that I really like. Obviously, if you believe in Fields, trading back was good and drafting a good tackle was good. But aside from that, man, I don't know. Oh, so we have a question here. Thoughts on DeAndre Swift? Should I drop him for Joshua Kelly with Eckler being banged up? Um,
Listen, for running backs, especially in the Eagles offense, I'll say on Swift, I think there's more of a chance you'll see Joshua Kelly being used as a regular than you will DeAndre Swift. The Eagles have shown over the last 3 or 4 years that they'll swap guys in and out. It might be a game where he goes for 20 touches and 120 yards. It might be a game where he has 4 carries for 13 yards and you're screwed for the week. But Joshua Kelly has been fairly productive, and we know that they're going to get their running backs involved in that system. There are going to be a lot of check downs. I mean, Herbert's average depth target is a new stat that I've learned over the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to get more brushed up on the fancy lingo and everything, because I just, I'm old school with my approach and the way I've been taught the game from all my years of playing and whatnot. But his average depth of target is very low, which will probably get you more touches in the receiving game as well. So personally, I think it probably will be a fair trade, but look, it's boom or bust. You may get to the point where Swift is the main guy. He's going for those 20 and 80 plus yards in a touchdown every week. So I would probably make a trade. It's boom or bust.
Yeah, I'd pick up Josh Kelly because I think Kenneth Gainwell's a more reliable player anyway. I just don't see the upside there, and I think Kelly looked pretty good in the game. I also think that they'll lean on him more heavily too, and also Eckler is always banged up, so this is probably not a short-term thing, unfortunately. So that's what I would do. But
another quick point: it's not like people are going to be like clamoring to get DeAndre Swift off the waiver wire. So if there is a situation where he has a solid week, and people are, you might want him back on the roster, there's probably a situation to where you'll be able to acquire him again later in the season. So I think it's fair enough to make the trade now.
Yeah, let me put it this way: I did not draft DeAndre Swift in my fantasy league for a reason. So, all right, so that's got to do it. We've been here for almost 2 hours, and we got sidetracked on Chicago Bears missteps, and unfortunately, I saw it coming, which I feel bad for Bears fans in saying that, but ultimately I did, and they probably won't have the first overall pick this year, but I don't think that they're going to be good either. I honestly did consider choosing them for my prediction for first overall pick again, but I think they'll win a few more games than that. But
yeah.
All right. You can find all of our written work over at defianttakesfootball.com. You can find us at BMaxDean on Twitter, as well as at Kyron Samuels. We are still sort of figuring out the final schedule for the live streams, but for sure we will be doing our post Monday Night Football weekly recap, and we will be doing, I believe, going forward, a preview for Monday night, in which we talk about a few other things, including some rookies and maybe some injuries. But we'll confirm that in the week to come. And then we should be doing a Thursday night recap as well, which will talk about a number of different topics in the NFL world. All right. Be back. Check us out. Appreciate y'all. For those of you live, appreciate staying up late with us. For those of you not live, we'll see you next time.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.